If Durkheim walked into India in 2026 and saw the NEET suicide crisis, what would he say? Not these kids are weak, not they couldn't handle pressure. He would look at the system and say, this is exactly what I predicted 150 years ago. But here's the question. Does his perspective actually apply here? Can we use his theory to understand what's happening today? In this video, I'm not here to prove whether he was right or wrong. I'm trying to decode his perspective, understand how he saw society and why suicide mattered to him sociologically, and also understand does this lens help us understand the NEET crisis? So let's begin.
Before I start, let me tell you the reference for this content. I have referred to the book Sociological Theory by George Ritzer. Alright, so what was Durkheim's perspective? According to Durkheim, he was not concerned why any specific individual committed suicide. He said it is the job of a psychologist. Rather, Durkheim was more interested in explaining and finding out the difference in suicide rates. He was interested in why one social group had a high suicide rate than another. And he said when suicides in social groups are studied, it should be done sociologically. And he rejected the biological or psychological factors in as causes of suicides in social groups. What does this mean and why did he say this? In order to understand this, let us first answer a few questions. What was Durkheim's perspective and ideology in studying sociology, and what was his methodology? According to Durkheim, the thoughts and actions of an individual are impacted by large scale social structure and the society itself. Let us understand this with an example. Say, if a doctor wants to treat a pathological disease, he will not limit himself to only symptoms of that disease. What he will do? He will find out what is the causative organism, what is the mechanism or pathophysiology of that disease. That is the root cause that is causing those symptoms. So, Durkheim also said that since it is the society or the social structure that is uh, impacting an individual's behavior or thinking, the main focus should be the society itself. So he wanted to study sociology from a macro level perspective. That is, the culture, norms, institutions that impact an individual's behavior. And he named these culture, norms, institutions as social facts. What are these? And why did he name it as a social fact? Let's find out.
What are social facts? Durkheim said social facts are things that are external to and coercive of an individual. Now, here are three key words that we need to understand: things, external, and coercive. First, let's see things. Why did Durkheim consider social facts as things? Durkheim said social facts are to be treated as things. That means he wanted social facts to be studied empirically and not philosophically. What does this mean? Durkheim said when we are studying the social world philosophically, that means we are making abstract theories, ideas that are conceived purely by mental activity, studying social phenomena without doing any actual study or observation and research, and making assumptions where these assumptions are neither tried nor tested. And Wilhelm shunned this philosophical approach of studying the social world. He said social world should be studied empirically instead, that is, by making observation, using scientific methodology and research methods. That is why he named it as things, so that he could separate it from ideas. And this is how Durkheim was successful in separating sociology as a discipline from philosophy. Now the next keywords, external to and coercive of an individual. Let us understand this with the help of an example. Think of the professions like doctor or engineer. The society accords huge respect and prestige to these professions, doctor, engineer, or IAS officer. But professions like social media creator, these roles are not given much respect or not considered prestigious enough by the society. Durkheim says, who made these norms? The norms of which profession should be given high respect and which should be given less respect? Who made this? The students or the parents? Durkheim says, no, the students or parents did not make these norms. Then who made it? Durkheim says, the society made the norms. But wait, isn't that society is made up of individuals? And if yes, then individuals made these norms as a society. Durkheim says, no. He says, and here is where he makes a big claim. He says individuals don't make society. It is the society that makes the individuals. And that's a big claim to make. But how is that true? And how does he justify it? Let's find out. The classic common sense trap. We assume society is nothing but people agreeing and collectively deciding rules or norms. It is, Durkheim says, no, that is wrong. It is not a summation game where people come together, put forth their individual choices, and that's how social rules or norms are created. No, in fact, he says society is an entity with its own reality, own objective reality, and he gives this a name too. He calls it sui generis. It means and something of that something of its own kind that has its own objective reality. Now, if that is the case, does that mean society existed even when there were no humans? Does that mean humans are not necessary for the society to exist? No, Durkheim never said that. What he says is, let us understand this concept with the help of an example. Let's break it down. Now, look at this. Hydrogen and oxygen atoms. They combine to form something called water. In order for water to be formed, we need these hydrogen and oxygen atoms. They must exist to form water. But once water is formed, the properties and characteristics like wetness or density of water cannot be found in any single hydrogen or oxygen atom. Now, water exists as an independent entity with its own properties and characteristics. Similarly, these atoms represent humans that must exist for the society to be formed. But once society is formed, and how it is formed? Through human interaction. When humans come together, they interact, they combine, they come together. This is how society emerges. And now this society has its social force, its own characteristics, its own reality that now has the force that externally shapes an individual's actions and behavior. So we just saw how society emerges organically. But how does this emergent society create norms? So the first thing is norms are not created. They emerge organically. That's a huge difference. So if norms are emerged, not created, how do they emerge? That's the biggest question. And let us understand this. And to explain this concept, I want to apply Durkheim's theory on our NEET case study. That is, these jobs, becoming a doctor, engineer, or an IAS officer, being accorded huge respect or considered very prestigious. These exist as norms today, integrated and embedded into the social structure that are acting as an external force on individuals' minds and behavior. But at some point of time, these were just another job. They were not crystallized as a norm. So how did that happen in the very first place?
So when a doctor cured a patient out of a deadly disease, saved people out of danger, this was considered an act of God, saving people, curing them of deadly diseases, an act of bravery and kindness. The doctor's family, the patient's family considered this a moment of pride, happiness, and excitement, a sense of shared feeling among the families and the people working around. This feeling that was shared among the people, where there is a collective energy, feeling of being part of something bigger than themselves. This became terms as collective effervescence. The doctor role was repeatedly associated with collective pride, family honor, economic security, and social celebration. Every time a family celebrated their child becoming a doctor, every time a neighborhood respected a doctor more than others, the symbol of doctor equal to success get reinforced collectively. Now, this symbol of becoming a doctor equal to prestige or success now becomes a social fact. It exists outside any individual. No single parent created it, but every parent feels its pressure as if it were a physical force because it has been integrated as a norm where doctors are given respect and it's a prestige to save dying people. Now, this norm gets codified through social institutions, enforced by social institutions. And how does that happen? Family, families want their child to earn respect, to uh, get into such prestigious jobs. So they tell their children, study hard, become a doctor. Education system promotes students and stream them towards competitive exams, where there is like coaching given from a very early age. And then there is media, which glorifies doctors or IAS officers or engineer roles. Now, these institutions become the machinery that transmits and enforces norms across generations. And by the time the individual of today is born into it, this entire structure already exists. Nobody created it. We did not create it. That aspirant did not create it, but they inherit it. And because it comes from everywhere, family, education, media, neighbors, everywhere, it feels like an objective reality, which is not a human creation. And this is what Durkheim means by external and coercive. It exists before you were born and will exist after you die. And when he said coercive, if you resist it by choosing any other option, any other profession, you feel the pressure, the family disappointment, social judgment, loss of status, and that is how the student ends up committing suicide. So, if suicide is not just an individual act, but also a social fact, then the real question is how much of what we call personal choice is actually shaped by society? Now, that's something I want you to think about, and you can comment down your thoughts, and then, So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you found this informative, please subscribe and share, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.